After the end of the First World War, the Allies had been unable to prove that the crucified soldier was anything other than a myth. Crucially, no one had been able to identify the victim. But only recently, new evidence has emerged amongst the papers of a British Red Cross nurse. On the 11th of July 1915, Ursula Challoner was questioning a wounded Canadian soldier. Her job was to find out what had happened to missing men. Now just 12 weeks after the battle at Ypres, Lance Corporal Clement Brown passed on the story of the crucified soldier, but he also came up with a name.
There was a Sergeant Bain or Band, but I cannot remember the number. He was crucified after the Battle of Ypres on one of the doors of a barn with 5 bayonets in him. I cannot be quite sure of the name of the place.
Ursula Challoner's report never reached Sir Edward Kemp's inquiry, but it seems to provide the vital evidence of identity that his eyewitnesses lacked. Could this Sergeant Band of the 48th Highlanders of Canada have been the crucified soldier? The 48th Highlanders of Canada was a volunteer regiment from Toronto. Many of those who enlisted were Scottish immigrants. Within weeks of the declaration of war, some 970 officers and men had signed up.
The men who made up the 48th Highlanders, which became the 15th Canadian Infantry Battalion, were typical of any of the militias across Canada. Being kilted, it would have a certain amount of honour associated with it and a certain amount of respect.
Before departing for Europe, the 15th Battalion proudly posed for an official photograph at Valcartier Camp in Quebec. At this time, they were over 1,000 strong. Most of these men would not survive the slaughter at Ypres. This photograph was taken on the morning of the 25th of April 1915, after the gas attacks. Only 3 officers and 316 men remain. Harry Band, the man identified by Ursula Challoner as the crucified soldier, was born in Montrose, Scotland in 1885. He was one of 7 children. His father, Robert Band, had been a house builder. Harry emigrated to Canada, presumably in search of employment. His service record shows that he enlisted on the 18th of September 1914. His pay was to be sent to a Miss Isabella Ritchie of King Street, Dundee. Perhaps she was a former girlfriend. Harry Band is listed as missing from the 24th of April 1915. The 3 most compelling witnesses to a crucifixion had all recalled seeing a victim around this date. Private Barry had stated the 24th, Private Vivian the 23rd, and Lance Corporal Metcalfe had said on or around April 23rd. Confirmation that the victim may indeed have been Harry Band has come from his family. During the war, they received some extraordinary correspondence from a soldier in his platoon. On the 1st of June 1916, Private William Freeman wrote to Harry Band's sister, Mrs. Elizabeth Petrie.
As a private in Sergeant Band's platoon in France, and one who went through the battle at St. Julien in April 1915, and seeing Sergeant Band's picture in the mirror as missing, I thought it my duty to write and let you know that Sergeant Band was killed, 24th of April at St. Julien, as most of his platoon and the men of his C Company were captured. I am sorry for you all, and you have my deepest sympathy. He died as he always wished to, a soldier's and a hero's death.
But Freeman was hiding what he had learned of Harry Band's fate. Elizabeth Petrie was a determined woman. Ever since she had read reports of a crucified soldier, she had wondered whether this fate had befallen her brother.
If there was anything at all to do with the family, any problems, she seemed to know about it. And then with Uncle Harry, I'm sure she would have got into that really deep to find out just what happened. She'd be after the truth.
Band's sister Elizabeth Petrie wrote to Private Freeman, querying his account of her brother's death. Freeman's reply stunned the family.
I am very sorry to say that it is perfectly true. Harry was crucified. But whether he was alive at the time, I don't think anyone can say for sure. When I wrote to you about Harry's death, I didn't tell you all the horrible details. I thought it best not to tell you how they found him. It would only have caused you more worry, and I did it for the best. As other soldiers have told you, I expect you know all about it now. I think Harry must have thought a lot about you because he was always good to his men, and he always saw that his platoon got everything that was coming to them. He treated everyone the same and never had any favorites. You must miss him dreadfully.
The letters received by Harry Band's family are very interesting. Letters from the time were always written in a very guarded way. He died instantly. He suffered no pain. He served his country. You know, it was always very positive. They wouldn't really want to tell anybody at home that he died some sort of terrible death. So they're quite exceptional for that sort of detail as well.
Elizabeth Petrie had another letter confirming these details, as she informed her brother Martin.
I have got it, at last, the horrible details. Don't tell Bertha them all. I told her he was crucified. But they took him down alive. He was all hacked to bits and spat on and his eyes out. Oh, Martin, think of it. And yet the War Office has never notified me.
For years, the Band family kept their knowledge secret. Even Letty Band only learned what had happened to her uncle on the outbreak of World War II.
It was on the radio that war had been declared. And my dad seemed to have lost colour, and he had that drawn look. And he got up and he walked away. And I turned to Mum and I said, "What's the matter with Dad?" And she says, his brother was crucified in the First War. It all brought it back to him when this war was declared. And I know that he had some tears about it.
Harry Band's remains were never recovered from the battlefield. He is commemorated, along with 54,000 others whose graves are unknown, at the Menin Gate in Ypres. If Private Freeman's evidence had been available to Sir Edward Kemp's 1919 inquiry, the Canadian government would have had a far stronger case for the existence of a crucified soldier.
I don't think the incident was invented. I don't think it was purely a tool of propaganda, though it certainly became one. Something definitely happened of this nature on the Ypres salient in April of 1915.
To me, the symbolism of the crucified Canadian is the significant issue. To the men of those times, the Germans were the devil. By releasing the poison gas, they broke all the rules of civilization. And the Canadians, and the French with them, were really martyrs. So in a sense, the crucified Canadian is right in a symbolic sense.
When you hear all this, there's got to be something. Yes, I think now I do believe it, yeah.
The mass slaughter of soldiers on the Western Front dominated post-war public opinion. German atrocities were either forgotten or dismissed as Allied propaganda. The army was never brought fully to account for its war crimes in Belgium. Until now, its brutal behaviour in the First World War has remained a hidden history.